Introduction to Pronominal Suffixes on Irregular Forms. In the last chapter we looked at pronominal suffixes on nouns. So we had a noun, if that represents our noun, and then a box, our pronominal suffix on the end. We had two sets, if you remember. Our first set of pronominal suffixes were for singular nouns, both masculine and feminine, same set. And then our second set was for plural nouns. Again, that set applied to both masculine and feminine. Now, in this chapter, we're going to look at what happens when you put pronominal suffixes on a whole host of other irregular forms. And what we'll find is that the pronominal suffixes themselves, these over here, are essentially unchanged. There's a couple of places where we have some changes, and I'll tell you where that is. But the majority of the changes are over here. The changes are to the noun base, right over here. Now, there's one paradigm that I'll suggest that you memorize. The rest of the forms that we'll look at, just pay attention to what the change is, so that you can recognize it when you're reading. And at the end of this chapter, I'll summarize the whole thing again, so that you can get the bird's eye view and really just sort of hit the high points. Now, because this chapter has a lot of paradigms in it, and a lot of little details, I recommend that you have your textbook open in front of you. And these modules here, as you know, are based on or tracking Ross's textbook. And so if you're using that book, open up to chapter 15. If you're using a different Hebrew textbook, just find the relevant paradigm that this material is dealing with. And then as you view each module, write down in the margin what the salient points are for that paradigm. What is it that is changing? What is it that's different? And then perhaps take a highlighter and highlight the actual forms or the portions of the forms that are different. Because what's going to happen here increasingly as you move through these chapters, especially with the paradigm chapters, is there's just a lot of detail, and you're going to forget. And so what you're going to want to do as you read is you're going to want to use your textbook as a reference book and go back to it. So one, you need to know where this material is in your textbook, and two, it really helps if you have it highlighted and you have some notes in there that you wrote, that you understand, so that you can quickly look at it and say, oh yes, I remember, that one had the yud, or whatever. It's much faster than rereading the textbook, reading the paragraph material. And I recommend you do that with modules that deal especially with paradigms. Of course, you can do it with any of them. Taking notes is not a bad thing, but especially for the paradigm chapters, I think it'll help. If you want to use these modules as your reference, that means you have to come back here, figure out which one it is, and re-listen to a whole bunch of material. If you have your own notations down in your textbook, you just look at it, 2 seconds, you know what's going on. So that's how I recommend you attack that. Okay, let's now turn to the irregular forms themselves.